of the Chanukat HaBayit and Lichvod the Baal HaBayit and the entire family, Bnei Beto of the Baal HaBayit. The concept of Chanukat HaBayit, we always have it and we associate it with, of course, the reading of the special pakim from the Zohar and also from the Rambam and the Gemarot, but additionally it's with making a meal. And why is it important to make a meal during the Chanukat HaBayit is not something that is usually explained. And I want to venture to explain that based on something that I saw. So it tells us in Parashat Shmot, Vayiven are miskenot leFaro et Pitom ve'et Ramses, which means that Am Yisrael was worked and they built. Are miskenot leFaro. This word miskenot sounds out of place. Misken means a person who is impoverished, a person who's a nobody. What is Are miskenot? Cities of misken leFaro. So there's a very interesting Gemara. The Gemara tells us that a person who builds a building, a builder, is misken. It's going to cause the person to be impoverished. And you say to yourself, how does this connect? So there is a very interesting Hazal. The Gemara tells us, and it's brought down in the Midrashim, that HaKadosh Baruch Hu, when he came to take Am Yisrael out of Mitzrayim, the angel of Mitzrayim complained. And says, HaKadosh Baruch Hu, you created the world with mercy, with midat rahamim, and now you're going to judge the Egyptians and you're planning on drowning the Egyptians. How can you do such a thing? That's midat adin, and your world is midat rahamim. So HaKadosh Baruch Hu said, you're right, there's no way to carry out justice without a trial. He called all of the ministering angels of all the nations, judge this case between me and him, between the malach of the Egyptians and me. And it says that HaKadosh Baruch Hu presented the entire case, like a lawyer would do. And he said from the beginning to the end what the Egyptians were doing and how they were treating Am Yisrael and this whole Are Miskenot, that they made him build and they made him a lot of trouble. And then the angel of the Egyptians defended to the best of his ability. And in truth, the Gemara says that it was kind of the rest of the Beddin, the rest of the tribunal over there, didn't have a clear decision. Gabriel came along, he brought himself down to the world, he took a brick out of the buildings of Am Yisrael that they built, and in that brick contained the cement that had in it, the Rachmana litzlan, a child of Am Yisrael that was cemented into the brick. He brought it before the court of Shamayim and he said, this is what the Egyptians did, and that was the final straw where Midat Rahamim converted to Midat Adin, and the Egyptian fate was sealed and set. That Am Yisrael was going to leave, and part of the leaving process, the Gemara tells us, they took all the gold and the silver. The Egyptians were left from the highest of the high, they went to the lowest of the low. They became impoverished. They didn't have anything, especially since you couple the fact that they left with their jewelry, and all of the rest of the jewelry was taken with the warriors and the soldiers, because that was the general attitude. It was to show confidence. We're willing to take our gold, to take our silver, to show that we're not going to lose in the battle. And all of that went to Am Yisrael. So they lost all of their money and they drowned. So this is Are miskenot leFaro. Paro made Am Yisrael build, and through the building he became impoverished, and also miskenot sakana. All his people became life-threatened. So, if you look up the Maharal says something very important, and he explains that what's the connection between a building and poverty? Why should forcing someone or making someone or being a contractor, I guess, make a person impoverished? And he says, what is a binyan, a structure? A structure by its very definition is a confinement. As it goes ahead and it reduces the bracha, it limits the bracha, and bracha is the exact opposite. What's bracha? Bracha is endless. When HaKadosh Baruch Hu blesses humanity, he says, Ufaratz yama v'kedma v'tzafona v'negba. The whole idea of a blessing is there is no limit. Just go south, north, east, west, just everywhere. And that's the language. What does bracha mean? If you look at the word bracha comes from the word berecha. Berecha means like if you were to have a stream that would go into a pool, and it constantly goes in. No matter how much water you take out of that pool, that berecha, there's constantly going to be more and more, and it's going to replenish itself indefinitely. That is bracha. Bracha has no limit. It's berecha. It's this fountain that just keeps giving and keeps giving. And what's the opposite of that? Binyan. Binyan is the limitation. It's the confinement of bracha, which is why it represents really, where does binyan come from? Midat adin. It comes from the attribute of justice and judgment. It's strict. And midat adin generates mazikin. It generates angels that are very negative and they create a lot of damage. And this is the idea of the building which wakens midat adin, which is what the Egyptians managed to arouse by causing the Jews to build. As a matter of fact, it says that when the person who was not Jewish came to Shammai, it says that he said, teach me the entire Torah al regel ahat. And that's like famous, everybody knows that part. And they know that Shammai kicked him out, but the Gemara says very specifically, he was megaresh oto, he kicked him out, be'amat habinyan, with the stick that you would measure an amma of the building. And if you look at the commentaries, they explain, Shammai was actually a builder. He was a person that would make his parnasa, as back then there was, all the Tanaim would have jobs, and Shammai was a builder. And he would build, and that was his parnasa. Now what's building comes out, according to what we're saying, is midat adin. And we know Shammai was the polar opposite of Hillel. Hillel was mercy, Hillel was compassion, and Shammai was very strict in judgment and went by the letter of how things. So what did he kick him out with? Amata binyan, with midat adin. He says, this is how you act towards the Torah. You're going ahead and you want to be taught the entire Torah like you could figure it out in one sitting. It's a disgrace to say such things. And he kicked him out, be'amata binyan. So this concept of binyan shows judgment. And then we look, and you see in the Targum Yonatan, he explains beautifully. The pasuk, we read it a few weeks ago in the parasha. It says that Mi ha'ish asher bana bayit hadash velo chanacho. Who is the one that built the house and did not mechanich the house, did not inaugurate the house? So the Targum Yonatan explains the words, the translation of velo chanacho, velo kava be mizuzta, and didn't put in the house a mezuzah. That is the chinuch. And you say to yourself, how did he get from chinuch to mezuzah? Very simple. Because if binyan, if the building is midat adin, then you have to counter. And how do you counter midat adin? By going ahead and putting Shem Hashem, the name of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, the mitzvah, which mitzvah is indefinite. It doesn't have any finite point to it. It's constant, especially mezuzah. Every moment that a person lives in the house, he's fulfilling mitzvah mezuzah. He's living in a house with the mezuzah. So the mitzvah is not finite. It continues. It has the power to negate the midat adin. It has the power to negate the mazikim, the harming angels, because of the protection of the mezuzah. And in truth, this is the reason why we have a seudah. What's a seudah? You're going and providing a meal for other people. That's called chesed. That's midat Avraham Avinu. Avraham Avinu would bring people in. And he was the midah of chesed. He was the midah, the attribute of kindness. And kindness is the opposite of the binyan. So the whole idea of making a meal during the time of the Chanukat HaBayit is to introduce into the house midat rahamim and to counterbalance the midat adin that exists in a structure and in a construction. And this is something that we have to constantly remember, that our home, it's not good enough to do one and done. Okay, we got rid of it. It's always an effort of chesed, of making sure that the house has mitzvot inside the house, that it's only done for the sake of the purity of the home. Only things that are kadosh are introduced into the home, and not things that chas v'shalom take us away from that spirituality and bring us more into the construct of the physicality. And Bezat Hashem, I give a bracha mikerev lev, from the depths of my heart, to my dear friend David, Mamash, from Omik Libi, in which we developed a very strong connection over the last few years that we've gotten to know each other, and a lot of conversations. And I wish she was here. She's upstairs. All right, but Bezat Hashem, you and your wife together should be zocheh to raise your children properly, al pidei haTorah, al pidei hamitzvot, and to continue to grow b'siyata dishmaya with the help of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, to get higher and higher in the steps and levels of spirituality. Amen ve'amen.